Hi, and welcome back to another AnyRPG Development Livestream. In these videos, I livestream the development of the AnyRPG Engine, a 100% free and open source role-playing game engine designed in Unity and written in C#. These videos are unscripted and give you a chance to take a behind-the-scenes look at the slow, methodical, non-glamorous side of software development. For more information on AnyRPG, be sure to check out AnyRPG.org, where you can find documentation on the engine and links to executables of the AnyRPG Alpha game, as well as the full source code at the GitHub repository. If you'd like to see more of this type of content in the future, be sure to like the videos, subscribe to the Cohesion YouTube channel, or just leave a message in the comments telling me what you would like to see. In today's episode, I will be fixing a bug that I discovered during the last stream. And that bug happens when you loot unique items, and there's more than one unique item in your loot table. And I've got a guy here and made a save file so I can demonstrate the bug that's happening right now. So let's just go take a look at that. I'm not going to reproduce it because it'll actually freeze up the Unity editor to the point where I'd actually have to restart it. Because what happens is, with this bug, it creates an accidental infinite loop, and infinite loops in Unity can't really be broken out of in the editor with pausing it, because technically pause doesn't happen until the end of the frame. So in order to do this, we need to trigger two unique items to drop before we loot them, and since each of these zombies will drop unique items, I'm going to attack this zombie over here, and then I'm going to pull this zombie over here into combat with me, and I'm going to bring him over here and kill him, and when we loot, we're going to AoE loot, and we should see two lesser condensed essences of death in our loot table here. So there they are, two of them. Now if I was to hit the take all button right now, what's going to happen is the game is going to freeze up, so we're not going to do that. But we've actually got a couple of different but semi-related bugs to solve here. The first is I can get two unique items dropping, and we don't want that. The second is that my looting capability here, when I'm looting stuff, it all happens in a loop, and that loop doesn't have any breakout conditions, which is not fantastic practice. So let's take a look and see what's happening here. Just clean this up so that we're only looking at the stuff that we're working on today. Okay, so we have a function here called take all loop. Take all loot, I mean. And right there is the problem. While pages.count is greater than 0 and inventorymanager.myInstance.myEmptySlotCount is greater than 0. So essentially, if we have an item that we can't loot and it just stays in there, then this loop will continue infinitely. So first, we need a breakout condition. So let's make a breakout condition. And actually, let's allow 100 iterations of this, so 10 pages. It's kind of arbitrary, but honestly, we shouldn't really be in a situation where we're AOEing down so much stuff that we have like more than 10 pages of loot anyway. Or actually, that's like 20 pages because it's like 5 items per page, or maybe even 4. So whoops, we also need a current loot count. Alright, so we should be able to just increment that right there. And this should give us the ability to break out of the loop after it's run 100 times. But we still have another issue in here, and that's the fact that we could even get to that 100 count in the first place. So although this is an emergency condition, it's not like a great permanent fix for this. It's more in case there's something in the future that we didn't anticipate that would prevent us or I mean keep this loop going. So what we want to do basically is we want to figure out the size of our dropped items table here. That would actually probably even be a better way to do this, and we might even just not even need that breakout condition then after that. So let's go to that take loop function, because what it's going to do is the button has some loot, and the button gets that loot set at some point when we roll the loot. So we roll the loot when we add the loot. So we create these pages, and each page contains an item. So basically what we can do is we can just add up the items from all of the pages. And we don't have a function to give us the total item count here. So it would be probably good to add something like that in here as well. And when we add this loot here, we get it from this list of drop loot. And that list of drop loot comes right here, where we interact with our lootable character and get him to roll all of his loot. And although we could just grab that number right here, we're not actually storing that at any point. Or are we? There we are. Drop loot equals items. Okay, so we get that item right here. We put it into dropped loot. We cycle through dropped loot and we add the dropped loot to all the pages. But we still have the initial dropped loot list. When we go in and we take some loot, we call this lootDrop.remove method. My loot table dot my dropped items. This item is assigned to its loot table when it's created. So at that point, technically we're removing it from the original loot table, not necessarily this dropped loot list right here. I guess that doesn't really matter though, because realistically the only thing that we need to do at the point when we start this take all loop is to get the current count of valid items on the dropped loot list. The current count of items that are not null. And then we'll just run through the loop. Okay, well, let's start with some debug messages anyway. So let's start with a message that just telling us the count of the dropped items. At the same time, what would be kind of nice is to see whether or not any of them were invalid. Okay, now if I go into the game and I open up a loot page and then I pull one item out of it and then I hit the take all button, I expect to see potentially this message show up once. So let's go and try that. Because if we see that, that means that we're going to have to clear null references to get the accurate size of the list. If the removal of that item when somebody loots it doesn't actually currently remove it from that dropped items list. Okay, so let's start this here. We're going to kill the zombie. And I'm going to grab the skeleton soldier as well, but not the other zombie, because the other zombie has that other item that we don't really want on our loot table. Okay, good. So we have a condensed elemental death and a lesser elemental, so that's good. We're not going to run into the unique item problem. I'm going to loot an 8-slot bag. And then I'm going to hit the take all button. And then I'm going to pause the game and go look at my console. And we didn't get any null. You know what, because removing it from that other dropped items list. Interesting. Didn't. Okay, let's go back into the code here, because I didn't see the message I was looking for. I didn't get that message at all. In fact, if I had to guess, I would actually say that if we display that dropped items count the whole time we go through that loop, it may not even be dropping down, because we may not be removing items from that dropped items list at all. So let's see if that's what's happening. Okay, let's try this again here. So we're going to take one of these, and then we're going to hit take all on the rest. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. They're not actually being removed from drop items when we're removing them and putting them in our inventory. So that in itself is actually kind of important. I think we probably should be removing them from there. So we actually need a way to do that. All loot is taken by loot buttons. There is no other way to get loot. There we go. See, we remove it from the pages right here. we ask the loot drop to remove itself from its original table, but we do not remove it from the list of dropped items. And since we're literally, yeah, okay, that's the issue. List of loot dropped loot dot remove loot drop item. Okay, so theoretically I can just go loot right there, right? Okay, we have to remove a loot drop from the drop loot. Okay, so what we need to do here is search for that item in the drop loot table. So we will need a new function for that. Since we can't modify a table at the beginning, or well, you know what, we just can't continue our next enumeration. Since actually this will probably work. We can just try, because technically we're only ever removing one item from this list, so we won't make it to the next enumeration, which would then give us an error that the collection was modified while we were accessing it. This may work, it may not. So we'll try, see what happens. Okay. Let's take a look now and see if our dropped items count goes down. Because if it does, then we're in luck. And we have a proper and accurate dropped items count as we lose stuff. Okay, we're gonna hit this zombie. We're gonna get the skeleton slayer to come over, kill the zombie. All right, good, let's see. So we're gonna take that, and then we have the lesser and the regular one. So we're gonna take all of those. Awesome. So now we have what looks to be a proper count going down. Okay, good. So with that done, now that we have a proper count of items in our table, this whole like loop breakout thing is probably not needed, because it should be like impossible for us to like basically our loot table can't really have an infinite size, so we're just going to do a for loop now instead. And we'll structure that like this: for I is less than drop loop.count. No, you know what? Okay, we're going to use the drop loop.count as the maximum loop count. And that actually needs to go inside the middle for each loop, because it's going to run once for each button, not once for each page. So now all we need to do is make the maximum loop count the size of drop loop.count. All right, that's better. Okay. That should work. That should work quite nicely. So if pages somehow ends up being less than 0 before our maximum loop count is reached, we break out. If we end up running out of space at any time, we end. And finally, No, there's an interesting condition right here. If we had no loop buttons on a page, technically, if a page existed with no loop buttons and our inventory had empty slots in it, the current loop count would never be incremented because it's inside of a loop that would never get executed. And this and this thing would still run forever. Okay, that's neat. So loop buttons is going to get recreated every time we run out of loop buttons, basically. There should have already been loop buttons when we hit the takeAllLoot method. Okay, let's try something. This is maybe a little bit of an experiment, but no, you know what? Those loop buttons will never go away. So we can't use like there's no loop buttons existing as a breakout condition for this. Realistically, we still need to set some kind of breakout condition just in case this doesn't get run. Of course. If we were on a page with no loop buttons, the loop buttons would of course actually be empty. So we can actually set loop buttons to empty here. So if loop buttons dot, is this length? This is an array, yeah. There. That should prevent this entire loop from ever executing under the circumstance when loop buttons is for whatever reason empty. Should never happen, but better safe than sorry. So now that we've got that breakout condition done, and this loop should be properly counting down, we should have solved basically the bug now where we can run into a circumstance where we can get into an infinite loop. So now the scary part, we're going to go into the game and we're going to attempt to recreate this bug and attempt to actually freeze up the game. And if we instead end up breaking out of the loop, we'll know we'll have at least solved the first part of the bug. So let's start the zombie attack. We'll kill this zombie over here. Now we need to kill a second zombie, and since no one's going to spawn until that guy's looted, we're going to grab this zombie from standing over there. Then we're going to grab the skeleton soldier as well, because we actually want like a bunch of loot here, a couple pages worth. All right, so now we should have a bunch of loot. And we have 2 of these unique items showing up, and we're going to deal with that later. But the key that we're really interested in right now is basically if I hit the take all button, do we freeze up? Or do we get a couple messages that you can't loot unique items and then eventually the loot breaks out? All right, that's exactly what we're looking for. That is the behavior we want. It looks like we got that bug fixed because this guy stayed in the loot window because we can't loot him anymore. And everything else appeared in our backpacks. We properly got an item that you can, or I mean a warning that you can only loot 1 unique item. And actually, I think that's probably good enough for now because, to be completely honest, although I don't want the ability to loot multiple unique items, I don't necessarily want to prevent them from dropping at this point, because if you killed, like, let's say, like the only 2 mobs that had an item like this that was unique at the same time and only 1 dropped, you'd have to wait for them to respawn. And realistically, like, the more sort of sensible behavior to the user is that he can just click on this one in his bag, he can accept the abilities from it, and now he can click on that one and he can get the last ability that he didn't get. And I think that's actually probably the most logical way to go from the user's perspective, because then the user doesn't have to go and kill another mob and didn't lose basically the second item. So I think that's actually good. And with that, we can actually create our next build. So we'll go into the game manager here, and we're going to bump the version to 0.33 alpha. And then we should be able to just build this thing and upload the source code to GitHub. So we'll go in and we'll make a nice commit message here. Nice, so we only had to literally modify like 1 file for that. Okay. So fix bug with looting, I'll call it infinite loop bug. That makes more sense. Fixed infinite loop bug with looting unique items. All right, awesome. So now we're just going to do a build and publish that. And we'll need to actually create a new release directory for this. You know what I need to do? I'm going to make a template directory here as well, because basically I don't want to go through and create these directories each time, and I don't really have like any automation set up yet for building this stuff. So inside of every directory here, we've got artifacts and build. let's try that. Just delete that. Copy our template. Okay, that's good for now. And when we do this build, we're doing the build in this directory right here. Good. And then we're just going to go over to GitHub here and we'll make a new release. We're doing basically semantic versioning here. This is just a bug fix release, no major new features, nothing that would break, for example, like our save files. And when this gets published, that will be the address for it. And it looks like now all I need to do basically is just upload this thing and make the patch notes for that. So I think we're going to end the stream here, and I'm going to start a new stream as soon as I have this version uploaded to the website, so sometime probably in the next half hour or so. And I'll be re-recording the playthrough, the developer playthrough of AnyRPG, because the last version that I recorded, it was my first time using this streaming software, and I didn't realize that the desktop audio was way louder than my voice and you couldn't really hear anything I was saying. So we're going to re-record that, hopefully with the audio fixed, and then let everyone know about this thing. All right, so thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.